Salesforce.com, and just make sure you can access your unique org for the lab exercises. It's admin at df09, Adobe, and then your unique three-digit number.com, and then password 1. If you do run into any issues, we have helpers here to assist you. Let's see. Could I have my helpers raise their hand right now? So they'll be circulating around. So if you do have a problem logging in, please just raise your hand, get it up high, and then they can come and assist you. Okay? Yeah. So it's going to be admin at df09, Adobe, and then your three-digit number.com. And the password is simply password and then numeric 1. Okay. And for those of you who are just coming in, I do recommend that you move up. It's a little bit hard to read when we get to the Eclipse tooling to read the code from the back rows. So if you're in those last 5 rows, we do have some seats available up here, and it's a lot easier to read the XML and the action script and all that good stuff. So. I know everyone likes to sit in the back of the class, but well, it looks like it is the top of the hour, so let's get going. Like I said, if you could, as you sit down, if you could log in to your org, it's admin at df09, Adobe, and then your unique three-digit number.com. The password is password 1. And let's jump back a little bit. So this is the hands-on training combining Force.com with the Adobe Flash platform. My name is Chris Berry. I'm a technical instructor here at Salesforce.com. I teach a lot of developer classes, so things like Visualforce and Apex, and also developing functionality using things like validation rules and all that kind of good stuff. I also have helping me out up here, my driver is Seb, all the way from Europe, and he'll be assisting me with doing the lab exercises. Here's our safe harbor statement. This is especially relevant because what we're going to be taking a look at today is still in the developer preview state. And what that means is that anything that you're seeing here is subject to change before it goes generally available. So keep in mind, or don't make any planning or purchasing decisions based on any specific functionality that you see here today. And the reason is that, like I said, the product managers and the developers are still deciding what will ultimately be the product that is made GA sometime next year. Okay? If you haven't already, please take a moment to log into your orgs. Each of you has your unique three-digit ID. Another thing that I would recommend that you do, Seb, can we switch over to Windows? It takes a few minutes to launch the Adobe Flash Builder. So what I'm going to recommend is that you launch that right now. Seb, could you? It's from the Start menu. If you go to All Programs, and then you go up to Adobe, there's the Adobe Flash Builder plugin Beta 2 Eclipse Launcher. That's the tool that we're going to be using today. Do not launch Eclipse from the desktop. That is a separate install, and it does not have the Flash Builder functionality built into it. Okay? So like I said, all programs, and then Adobe, and then the Adobe Flash Builder. Raise your hand if you do have any issues. Okay, so let's, can we go back to the PowerPoint presentation? Another thing I'd like to point out, in addition to my helpers, we also have Lewis, who's one of our training account executives. If you want to learn anything more about our training offerings, you can speak to Lewis back there. Lewis, can I have you raise your hand? All right. We also have our helpers. Helpers, can you raise your hands again? Thank you. And then we also have Marcus Spahn, who is the product manager for this particular piece of technology. Marcus, can you raise your hand? He's going to come in very handy when we get to the Q&A portion of this. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a short presentation to intro the technology, and then we're going to dive into doing the hands-on portion of our training. Here's just some of the more recent, or maybe the last 5 years, some of the trends in IT. There's this thing called cloud computing. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. There's also this consumerization of IT. In other words, creating the Web 2.0 experiences, and then we've also adopted this with Chatter, moving those sort of consumer apps into Salesforce.com. But the thing that I'd like to highlight here is the rich user experience, and this is really where it comes in, or where Adobe comes in, because we're taking the rich user interface that Adobe tools allow with the Flex framework, and then we're incorporating that with what we're doing with Salesforce. In addition, over there, the ubiquitous access, the thing I want to highlight there is offline. So the tool that we're talking about today is going to enable you to create applications that can run offline. So the thing about the cloud, as you all know, you need to be connected up to it. This gives you the ability, so for your sales reps, maybe they're at visiting a customer, they don't have wireless access, or they're on an airplane, offline access is a key thing that we get here. This technology, like I said, it's a combination of the rich user interface technology that Adobe is famous for and hooking up those user interfaces to the Salesforce.com cloud or Force.com platform applications. So kind of the best of both worlds, as it says. Let me give you a little bit of background. I know that you're all familiar with Force.com, but let me give you a little bit of a two-slide Adobe primer. There is the Adobe Flash player. It's probably the vast majority of you have this installed on your web browsers. This is an execution environment for running Flash and Flex applications within the context of your web browser. There's also something called Air, and Air is the Adobe Integrated Runtime. This is different from the Flash player in the sense that you can run those Flash and Flex applications from a desktop environment. In other words, separate from a web browser. As you know, are probably aware, there are security limitations that are placed on applications that run within your web browser. For example, you cannot do file I/O type access, nor can you do much in the way of interacting with the desktop, the operating system. Adobe Air, because it is a desktop application running separate from the web browser, we do get those additional capabilities that a windowed application would have. There's also Lifecycle. Lifecycle is a key component within this. It is a data management service, and we utilize this to provide a layer of abstraction for accessing data. It gives us the ability to access local data as well as data in real time upon our cloud-based applications. The tool that we're going to be utilizing today is the Adobe Flash Builder. This is an Eclipse-based set of tools. It's a great IDE. Within this IDE, what you would be doing is creating Flex applications. Flex, by the way, we don't have a bullet on that, but Flex is a framework for building those rich user interfaces. Flex is made up of two primary ingredients. The first is MXML, which is a markup language for creating those user interface elements that would appear on your pages. And then ActionScript, which is based on ECMA script, to provide the client-side logic in terms of things like event handlers or coding the query up on the server, so on and so forth. So how does this all work, what we're doing here? Well, the Adobe Flash Builder, like I said, it runs in Eclipse. Well, so does the Force.com IDE. So you can run these two tools, and much like we have, you can run them side by side within Eclipse. By the way, for those of you who just entered, I do recommend that you launch the Adobe Flash Builder. It does take a few minutes to launch. You can simply go to All Programs and then go to Adobe and then select the Adobe Flash Builder. So this is the tooling that you would utilize over here in the dashed box. Our Force.com ID for configuring the back end, our data model, and our business logic up on the cloud within our Force.com applications, and then the Adobe Flash Builder for the UI. And then ultimately we would take these runtimes and deploy them up to the cloud so that when users go out to their application, they could download the binary runtime and use that for either offline access or conceivably doing applications within the browser. So those are those two options at the end, running applications on the desktop, in other words, Air applications, and then running applications within the browser, in other words, using the Flash player. Now, because this is a developer preview, the product team has decided to go after one of these right now, and what they've done is they've chosen to do desktop or the Air environment for the initial applications using this technology. So right now in the developer preview, we only support or only have the functionality for running these applications within the Air environment, the Adobe Integrated Runtime, in other words, desktop applications. We do not support running these within the context of a browser, in other words, utilizing the Flash player. Okay? And that's why we grade that one out. Here's an architectural diagram showing the different pieces that make up this solution, how it would work. So let me start with the tools up on the top. Here we have the Flash builder, like I said, based on Eclipse. There's a number of things that go into this, some of which are pre-built user interface components associated with Salesforce.com applications. The classic one would be the equivalent of in Visualforce an input field. We call it a label and field, but what it is a Salesforce widget that would render the label and then the appropriate control for interacting with that field based on its data type. So there's a bunch of pre-built components within this. In addition, there's the Force.com discovery and introspection of your data model. So each of you has unique orgs with your own custom objects and custom fields. You'll see that we're going to use the WSDL associated with your org, which describes your data model. We're going to import that into the Flash Builder environment so that you can readily access those different objects and different fields that are unique to your environment. Then we have the Force.com ID, all the regular things, writing Apex, configuring custom objects, in other words, configuring the back end of our applications. Below in this large box is the runtime environment. So here we have the Flash player representing our browser-based applications and the Adobe Integrated Runtime representing our desktop applications. You'll notice here is Lifecycle. It's our data management services. One of the great things about this platform is that we write to a single API, and the responsibility of detecting whether or not the user is online or offline is managed by the wrapper classes that we've created and the lifecycle technology. So you're going to be coding to a single interface, and then it's going to keep track of, well, do I need to store this data locally, as we see here in the local data store, if it detects that the user is offline, or if I'm online, let's operate in real time using our Web Services API. Let's either query or update the remote database up in the cloud. So a single interface, and it's taking care of that, all that plumbing for worrying about the state of the application. And then over here we have the Force.com over in the lower right-hand corner. We're still using the Web Services API, and we're using some of our offline functionality up in the cloud. If you've ever had experience using our desktop client in order to handle things like data synchronization and then conflict resolution. So some of the benefits of this environment: a single Eclipse-based IDE, so both our Flash Builder and the Force.com IDE. It also supports a design view, which I love, which is it's a WYSIWYG editor. So when you're creating these user interfaces, you can simply do things like drag and drop. all the things, if you've used the Flash Builder or the Flex Builder as it's called in version 3, the WYSIWYG design of user interfaces. There's also obviously a source view, so when you want to go in and hack the MXML and then the action script, you can go in and view the source. It has that pre-built data management and synchronization. You can deploy it once. One of the great things about Air is it has the ability to update so that, the problem with client servers, you all know, trying to update patches and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So it has that ability to do that kind of update functionality, and then it interacts with our cloud-based applications, right? So a new user interface. Here's the Enterprise WSDL. We're going to be using this in a couple of minutes. This describes your data model, provides you that functionality, or provides you that definition of the available objects and fields. And then the offline briefcase configuration. This is another thing that we're going to set up. The reason is that because we're offline, we have the issues of synchronization and conflict resolution. This is essentially the server-side piece to that. It also does some additional functionality like limiting the amount of data that's downloaded to the client. We don't want to overload that local data store with 1 million account records, for instance, and so we can put limits based on different criteria for what is downloaded to the client. Okay? All right, let's jump into our first lab exercise, which our first project is to create, from scratch, create a new Adobe Air application using our framework in the Adobe Flash Builder. If you have not already, log into your org. It's admin at df09, Adobe, and then your 3-digit number.com and password 1. And then also launch the Adobe Flash Builder, which is in the Adobe folder on your program menu. Sebastiano, can we launch Eclipse? Okay, so, I'm sorry, not Eclipse. Launch the web browser. The first thing that we're going to need to get this to work is we're going to need to download that Enterprise WSDL from your org to your local hard drive to then import it into the Adobe Flash Builder. So if you could, please, within your org, click on Setup. If you're being prompted for critical updates, just go ahead and select No. Obviously, we're not concerned about those here, but this pops up by default, and then click OK. And we're going to navigate under Setup. We're going to navigate to Develop. So please expand the Develop area. And then we're going to click on API. This is our Web Services API, our Metadata API, some other things. What we're interested in this case is the Enterprise WSDL. So go ahead and click on that link for Generate the Enterprise WSDL. This opens up, if you're, depending upon your web browser, but it opens up the definition of the Enterprise WSDL. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you, within your web browser, to save that file to your desktop. Now, there's a trick to this, which is we want to remove, it's going to be looking for a file with the WSDL extension, not the XML extension. So when we save this, let's make sure we do that. If you could download and then click Desktop, it looks like it's actually doing it for us, and then save to your desktop the Enterprise WSDL. Okay? Like I said, if you do have any problems, just raise your hand and someone can help you out with completing this. In addition, we also have printed out in your handouts the instructions. Okay? So we've now downloaded our Enterprise WSDL. Notice that actually we do have that XML extension. So let's make sure that we remove that. So let's see if we can... say, are we going to be able to? Well, let's see what we do, and then we'll see what happens. There's a second thing. So let's just keep going, and then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. There's a second thing that we need to do, which is we need to set up an offline briefcase. This is another configuration that we make in the web browser. So if you could hit the back button in your web browser to take you back to the API area under the Develop menu. Okay. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to scroll down to the bottom over here where it says Desktop Administration, and then expand that And then I'd like you to click on the link for offline briefcase configuration. Okay. There's going to be a splash screen in this case, and what we're going to do is we're going to just click on Continue, go through this particular window. Okay. And we're going to create a new offline configuration. Okay, so click on the button for New Offline Briefcase Configuration. This one, we're going to call this the Recruiting Desktop. And this application it's representing a recruiting application that we could run in a desktop environment offline. So let's name this Recruiting Desktop. Let's also activate it right now. So go ahead and check the box for Active. Okay. And then we need to enable access to this particular briefcase. So down here, what we're going to do is access is either per user or per assigned profile. In our case, we're going to do this based on profile. So if you could select from the drop-down list profiles, and since in this demo we're simply using the system administrator, which is our admin user, what we're going to do is we're going to select the profile system administrator and then use the arrow button to add that as the assigned members of this offline briefcase. Okay. Go ahead and click Save at this point. And now we have our offline briefcase. Now, a part of this is to define the data set that the user would be operating on in this application. So in the area here where it says Data Sets, I'd like you to click on the Edit button. No. Under Data Sets. I guess you can't see where I'm pointing. Yes, can help out, Sam? Yeah, so exactly. So under the Data Sets area, click on the Edit button. And then over where it has Add and Remove, we're going to select the Add button. In our case, we're going to be operating on reviews. So go ahead and select that Add button. And from this drop-down list, what I'd like you to do is select Review. Like I said, that's what our application is doing. This represents a review that an interviewer, as a part of the job application process, would fill out critiquing one of the people who came in for interviewing for a job. So if you could click OK now. All right, that launches this. Like I said, with the offline briefcase, we have the ability to do things like synchronization, but also limit the amount of data, either based on ownership, values within fields, or putting a limit, just a hard cap based on the number of records. What I'd like you to do is for set max record limit, we're not too concerned about downloading too many of these, so just go ahead and select no limit there. Okay? So we don't have to worry about the sort. And then just select the Done button at the very bottom. Okay? So we've defined our data set in our offline briefcase for the review. All right, so that's our offline briefcase. There's one final thing that we need to do, and that is to set up our admin user to be an offline user. It's a user permission. If you navigate to Manage Users and expand that, that's under Administration Setup. And then what I'd like you to do is to click on the link for Users. Okay. And we're going to edit the user account for our admin user. So go ahead and click on the Edit link for our user, admin. Okay. And the feature that we're going to enable is we're going to make this an offline user. Okay, so it's a permission that we need to enable for this user. Okay? So check that box and then click on the Save button. Okay. All right. So we did three things. We downloaded our Enterprise WSDL definition of our data model. We created our offline briefcase for synchronization and limiting the data set that's downloaded. And then we enabled the permission, the user-based permission for this user to run offline. Now let's go back to, or let's go to the Adobe Flash Builder. So let's minimize our web browsers and navigate back to the Adobe Flash Builder. And what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to, I can't actually tell, is the perspective already set to Flash Builder? Is that right? Let's see here. Yeah, I guess everyone's going to launch in the same way, but if you're not viewing this, or if it's not within the Flash perspective, you can either go to Menu and then do Open Perspective, and then if you don't see that list, just click Other, and then just make sure you select Flash. Okay? Raise your hand if you're having any issues with that. All right. We're going to create a new project to represent our client. What I'd like you to do is, over in the white space over here, which is our Package Explorer, I'd like you to right-click, and we're going to create a new project. Now, this is not, we're not going to select Flex Project, and the reason is we have a different template that we're going to utilize. There's a person who needs some help right there. There we go. So select, after you right-click, New Project. And now what we're going to do is we're going to expand the folder for Flash Builder. And notice that we have that little cloud icon for Force.com Stratus project. Stratus is just an internal code name that we use for this. So go ahead and select Force.com Stratus project. And then click on, I believe there's a Next. Thank you. Now we're going to name this project. So this is much like any other project within Eclipse. We need to give the project a name that's going to be a folder ultimately on our workspace. We're going to call this, once again, Recruiting Desktop. Okay, Recruiting Desktop. All right. Now, by default, it selects that we would run this application within the web browser. In other words, a Flash player. We're not going to, like I said, the developer preview only supports running desktop applications, in other words, Air applications. So we're going to need to select, for the application type, select Desktop. Okay, select that Adobe Air, and that's going to set up basically an application component for running a desktop application. And then finally, all we need to do after we make that selection is to click on Finish. It's going to run a wizard to generate our starter code, and this is going to create our project. Now, another thing that's going to happen, and we're going to see how this works. It will eventually pop up a dialog prompting us to enter in the location of our enterprise WSDL. Here's the, by the way, this Stratus application is the component that represents the desktop application. But here we have this dialog here, and it's prompting us for the enterprise WSDL. So this will automatically pop up. So if you haven't seen it, just give it a little bit of time. We do need some help up here, right there. Thank you. If you could click on the Browse button, okay, and then navigate to your desktop. And let's do star.star instead of WSDL because it did add the XML extension to that. So make sure that you're not limiting yourself to files that end in .wsdl. And then let's select our enterprise WSDL and then click on Open. Okay. And then now let's select Finish. Okay. What's going on behind the scenes right now is that classes are being defined within the Flex environment. These classes represent objects, and I mean object-oriented objects, and both objects in Salesforce, that you could then call and utilize. I guess you would instantiate an object based on these class definitions representing your objects and fields that exist associated with your data model for your org. Okay? All right. So we've generated our project. We've entered in the location for our enterprise WSDL. We need to do one last thing. By default, you'll see that the Stratus application, which represents the component, which is the sort of the container for our desktop application, we need to make a change to this one attribute, which is required types. And we're going to change this from account to contact, or I'm sorry, from account contact to review. And it's actually going to be not just review, the label, but review _C. This is the data that this application will be operating on. Okay? So remember that in our offline briefcase, we set it up to work with reviews. Okay? So review _C. Like I said, make sure you do the double underscore, not a single underscore. Okay? Let's save this within this environment. So go ahead and click on the save. So you can do it from the menu. There's also a button on the toolbar. So save. All right. Now let's run this. So we've done everything that we've needed to do in order to get this, to get a running application. So up at the top there, you'll notice that either from the menu, or you could also select the green button for running your application. So you can select from the Run menu and then select Run, I guess, yeah, Run menu and then Run item. So go ahead and click on that, and let's launch this. Now, when it prompts you what type of environment do you want to run this in, remember, once again, we're running this as an Air application, so select Desktop Application. Okay. Then click OK. All right. It's going to prompt us to log into Salesforce. So let's pause for a second here. One of the things that when you create these applications, it automatically inserts the logic for the user to log into their environment. Okay? So part of the pre-built functionality is the login dialog boxes, or the login functionality for logging into your remote instance. Let's enter in admin at df09 Adobe, and then your unique 3-digit number.com, and then for the password, password1. Now let's click on the login button, and let's access our environment. It's verifying the credentials, so we got all that plumbing taken care of for you. And here it's launched our application. This is a default application, just creating from a new one from scratch. Let me explain to you, it's probably not visible, some of the things that are going on here, but there's a lot of logic behind here that was built for you. I mentioned that we automatically create the login logic for you. Notice at the bottom there's this status bar down here, which is another component. It says application initialized. Notice it says no conflicts. This is doing a bunch of things for us. One, it's tracking the online status of the user. In other words, it's automatically detecting, is this user connected to the internet, connected up to the cloud? That's what that green circle represents in the lower left-hand corner. The second thing, notice it says no conflicts. Built into this, behind the scenes, is a conflict resolution UI. And one of the things that goes on when we make changes, if we're offline, is synchronization logic, so that if we do have conflicts, it'll pop up a UI to help your end users resolve those conflicts. There's also an interface for accessing data. So there's a whole layer provided to us by Lifecycle that provides us that data access layer that's available. Okay? All right. So even though I know it's a blank window right now, understand that there's a lot of pre-built functionality that's already here. Okay? All right, so let's stop this, and now what we're going to do is we're going to make it do something a little bit more user-oriented. So go ahead and click on the red X in the upper right-hand corner. Now we have, because we only have 1 hour, we have some pre-built code for you to utilize. And the way that we can download that pre-built code is that it's located in each of your orgs. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go back to your web browsers, and I'd like you to go to the Documents tab. If you could select the Go button for under folders, so just go ahead and do My Personal Documents and click on Go. you'll see that we have this recruiting application main window.txt. Go ahead and click on that link. There we go. Click on the file name. And then here you'll see click here to review this file. This is how we're going to download this. So on this link, it's the second from the bottom. Click here to view this file. Click on that link. Okay. Once again, it's going to open up the raw data or the raw text within the web browser. We're going to go up here and we're going to select that we're going to download this text to our desktop. So from your web browser, do File and then Save Page As, and let's download this text to our desktop. Okay. All right. Now we can minimize our web browser once again. Okay. Looks like, yeah. Seb, if you could minimize everything, because we're going to need to copy the text that we just downloaded. So here's our text file, the recruiting application main window. It's hiding the .txt extension. But what I'd like you to do is to double-click on that text file. Here's our code. It's made up of MXML and ActionScript. What I'd like you to do is now let's do a control. Let's click somewhere within this text file. Let's do the shortcut Control-A in order to select all the text. And now let's do a Control-C in order to copy it into the clipboard. Okay. Now we can navigate back to, I have a question up here, or I have someone needing some help, please. Now let's go back to the Adobe Flash Builder, and we're going to paste this into a file. Now do not paste it here. We are not pasting this into the application or the desktop application component. We're going to paste it into the window component. There's another file here called mainwindow.mxml, and this represents that component, which is the window as opposed to the application container. So I'd like you to double-click on mainwindow.mxml. All right. Let's now do a Control-A. And this time, instead of doing a copy, now we're going to do a paste of what we grabbed from our text file from our desktop. Okay? All right, so we have our pre-built code. We just pasted it in there. And now we have a more functional application. Seb is kind of scrolling through it right now. Like I said, this is made up of MXML markup. There are both, one of the things you'll notice is there are namespaces, both for Adobe components. So this is very flexible. You can use either Adobe provided components or components that you download maybe from the some third party. There's also there's a Stratus namespace which represents the components associated with doing Salesforce.com things, and we'll take a look at one of those. Finally, the last thing that you'll see is a bunch of ActionScript. ActionScript is the object-oriented language based on, like I said, ECMA script, a standard for writing that business logic or writing that logic within the UI layer. Things like your event handlers, writing the code to do the query, data quality checking, you name it. Okay? All right. Let's save our mainwindow.mxml file. Okay. So go up to File and then Save, or simply just click on the button. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make sure that you highlight, after you've done the save, I want to make sure that you highlight that main.mxml file, because that's the one that we, as it has with that green icon, that's the one we need to highlight when we run our applications within this environment. So make sure that's highlighted, and now we're going to run this again. Okay? So click on the green circle arrow icon to run this application. Okay? And when prompted, oh, actually, we already chose desktop, so it's all good to go. Now we're going to enter in our user credentials to log into Salesforce. So once again, admin@df09, and then Adobe, 3-digit number.com. Okay? And password 1. And then let's click on Login. Okay. So we're going to be logging in, once again, through our Web Services API up to Salesforce. Here we have, one of the things that was contained within our code was a default. We're using a few of the different UI frameworks. There's Spark and Halo. These are Adobe libraries for creating UI components. So here's one that just represents a list or a table of records, and it's just a standard Flex, a part of the Flex library. If we click on one of our records, so here the first one, in this case I believe it says Rev 18 and then Paul Revere. Notice that it also opens up an area to the right side. This is actually utilizing some of the Salesforce specific components or widgets or controls that allow us to interact with the data. So let's drag our cursor over to one of those fields. How about experience? Let's say Paul Revere actually, is better than we gave him credit for. And so let's double-click on that field, and let's change the value for it. So similar to our, our ability within Salesforce to double-click on fields, we can do that here. And let's bump them up to a 3, let's say. Okay. All right. Go ahead and click somewhere else so that it'll accept that. All right. And what's going to happen is that we now can save our record by clicking on the Save button. So click on the Save button now. All right. And what it did was it made a call, like I said, utilizing the Lifecycle Data Management Services, ultimately figured out, take a look, we are connected, we do have the green icon. In real time, save it up to your database in your org. Now let's go up to the web browser and verify that the change was made. So if you could now navigate to your web browser, let's go back to our primary tab where we had, our primary application where we had our recruiting application. And if you could click on the Reviews tab, that's where we'll find the review for Paul Revere. Here's our list view. If you could click on the Go button to see the list of all our reviews. And then click on, I believe it was Review 18. Let's click on Review 18. And then notice that even though we gave him, what was our comment here? Paul has no relevant experience for this role, but we're still going to give him a 3. So we ultimately updated the cloud. Do you have? We're actually going to hold the questions and answers to the end. I'm happy to take your question, but we're going to hold that to the last 10 minutes. Okay. So it updated in real time. Okay. Now let's make a change to our application. Okay. Just to show you some of these Stratus-based components. So let's go back to Adobe Flash Builder. Okay, so go back to our Adobe Flash Builder. Let's actually close this application. We're going to make a change to this application. Make a slight modification to our user interface. Okay, so go ahead and close the running application. And what I'd like you to do is in your main window.mxml file, on lines 98 and 99. Now, I'm going to show you how to turn on view line numbers in Eclipse. What you do is you right-click on the gutter, which Sebastiano has highlighted right now. And then let's select Show Line Numbers. And then you'll see that in the right to the right of the gutter now, it'll display our line numbers. Like I said, I want you to go down to line 98 and 99. And here we have a couple of these Stratus components called label and field that have been commented out. So let's go ahead and remove our comment tags. So remove the angle bracket, bang, dash, dash from the front of these two lines. And then let's also remove the dash, dash angle bracket from the very end. So let's remove those comments, those comment tags. And then now let's save this. One thing I want to point out before we move on is there's a key attribute to this particular component, and that is the field tag. What the field tag does is it uses our syntax for representing the object and the field name that we have up in our database. Okay? So notice that we have review _C, and then in this case we uncommented recommend for hire _C because it's a custom field, and then reason recommended. Okay? All right. Let's now go back to make sure that we have, like I said, make sure you have that main.mxml file highlighted. And now we're going to run this again and check to see that we're actually seeing our two new input fields displayed within our user interface. So if you could, go up and select that green button for running our application. Okay. We're going to need to log in again. So enter in your user credentials, admin at df09, Adobe, your 3-digit number.com, and then password 1. Okay. So let's log in again. Okay. From our list, why don't we just go, we'll stick with Review 18. Let's click on that. Now, notice that in the area over here, we now have two new fields. So, much like a markup language within something like HTML, by uncommenting these two lines, now we see these two components. Once again, we could double-click. How about reason recommended? Why don't we click on that one? Or okay. Recommend for hire. Let's go ahead and check this box, even though here we have 1, 3, and 2. And if we wanted to, we could fill out the reason recommended. And now let's go ahead and save our change here. Okay. All right. Notice that review saved, no conflicts, taking care of that for us. Now let's go back to our web browser, check to see that, in this case, Paul is actually being recommended. We can do a refresh on here. So notice that recommend for hire is not checked. Let's go ahead and just do the refresh icon or button. And then here, oh, you added in some comments too. Recommend for hire is checked. Okay. All right. Let's do a couple more things. Remember that we said that this is a desktop application. A user can work on it offline, right? So let's now go back to Adobe Flash Builder. And what I'd like you to do is, if your application is still running, let's stop it. So let's click on the red X for the running application. Okay. Actually, shouldn't have done that. Let's start it again. That's totally my fault. Let's start it again. Sorry about that. Sorry. Please log in again. It's Friday. I apologize. Okay, so log into our org. All right, now I'd like you to do something that some of you might find, morally objectionable. Ethically, you can't. But what we're going to do, Salesforce.com, probably one of the only times you'll hear this, let's unplug the Ethernet cord in the back of our PCs. It's going to require you to do a little bit of navigation down there. If you don't want to do it, you can watch us do it. I know it's much of a dilemma here. So let's unplug that Ethernet cord. What's that? Yes, you go. Unless you have any ethical concerns. It's like a magic trick now. All right. So here we've unplugged our Ethernet cord. We don't have any wireless enabled. And then notice that we have the gray icon here. So the application automatically detected that we are disconnected from the cloud, right? But it's still working. We still have a working application. So what we can do here is let's double-click on a review for Paul Revere. And let's go ahead and I don't think we really should be recommending Paul. So let's double-click on our recommend for hire. Okay. Let's check that box. Okay. We know, probably don't need to show you, but we know that that box is checked. Let's click on the Save button. Okay. Now what's happening is that built into Adobe Air is a local data store. Okay, it's a SQLite database. And so this modification that was made was actually stored locally to that database. Okay, so it's in that database. And then now, what we can do is we can go back and plug our Ethernet cord back in. So let's pretend we just got off our plane flight, something along those lines. Sales rep is out there. This is the most interactive hands-on training. Actually doing hardware stuff. So don't get that too much with cloud-based. Notice my icon says it's grayed out. It says review saved. Okay. It was saved locally. Let's give it a little bit of time. It's probably waiting to do its, doing its little timer, waiting to be refreshed. Ah, fantastic. All right, syncing, fetching changes, sync successful. So built into this application is the synchronization logic. It automatically detected a change in the state, allowed the user, or automatically for the user, synced our changes. Seb, let's now go back to our web browser, and let's verify let's do a refresh on here. Notice that recommend for hire is checked. Okay. And let's do a refresh, and then now recommend for hire has now been updated to be unchecked. Okay? There's also, we don't have time for it. I see that we're hitting our last 10 minutes for Q&A. I definitely want to do the questions and answer. You could also do something where you then make a change up on the web browser while you're disconnected, and then make a change locally. So now we're out of sync. What's going to happen, it pops up a default user interface called the conflict resolution user interface, and you can then use that to decide, well, what changes do I, how do I want to do the merge? Okay? All right, let's, Seb, if you could go back to my presentation. Let's, all right. Actually, I'm sorry, I didn't put up the slide for doing the exercise number 2. I just went directly into it, but we've already done that. Let's continue. Here is the screen. So if you did have that conflict, this is the screen that would pop up, and then your user could identify, thank you, could identify whether they want to go, what's the comparison on the fields, and then which one do they want to go with, either the server or the local. Okay. To learn more about this, check us out at the Training and Certification. In addition, I also want to mention that in the case of the Adobe Flash Builder, if you go out to developer.force.com, right on the main page, we have it's probably a Flash, Flash little applet there. And you can go out to the developer preview area. You can download the developer preview. You can download documentation. You can also, there's a really good tutorial that you can do. So if you do want to get in and start hacking and playing with that MXML and the action script, a much better opportunity than our very brief demo that we did here. If you could take a moment to fill out a survey, and excuse me, after the survey, we're going to have Marcus come on up, and if we do, I don't know if we have some Adobe people here. Are there any Adobe people here? Leah, you're not Adobe, but thank you. And then Marcus is our person. Seb, so the place where the course survey can be found is course survey, and then if you could please select the name of the session. What we did was, let's see, combining force.com with the Adobe Flash platform. So if you could just take 1 minute to fill that out, we appreciate and value your feedback on how you felt this went. And then, like I said, we'll open up for Q&A, and I know we have one already ready. And this is, by the way, Marcus, the person who is the product manager for this technology. So, great.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Great job, by the way. We should recruit you for product management. Grow your hair a little bit and grow a beard, and I can take vacation. You take care of everything.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. And here, I'll come over and... oh, we do have a microphone. Mark, right here. Thank you very much.
Just two quick questions. The first, we have that computed field showing there. So if we wanted to show that on the client side, I assume we have to do some client side calculation there. How would we deal with conflicts? Or how would you overwrite it to make sure that the server calculation is the one displaying when you connect again?
Right, yeah, that's an excellent question. So, I mean, calculated fields is something that in the developer preview we don't support. So, by default, what you would see is that they would actually show up as read-only fields. You could, of course, go ahead and basically use your own UI components and then re-implement the calculated field client side. But, I mean, you're right. The complexity in those kind of things is always that if you sync, the formula field will actually be evaluated in recalc, and so what you will actually see is that when we sync back to the client, we would actually override it with whatever the server calculated. So I mean, yeah, those are, that's a little independent from, whether you pick Adobe's technology. I mean, that's just a general problem when you actually do client-side stuff, and that's the reason why we, at least right now, we haven't found a good solution. So that's why we actually show a read-only field out of the box.
Okay, that's perfect. And then documents and the local data store?
Excellent question. That's obviously a use case that we want to enable pretty soon. So, things like that you could actually push out, for example, documents to the desktop, and also a Dropbox that you can actually drag and drop any document onto that desktop client. It would actually upload into your content workspace or stuff like that. So that's actually something that we will probably build probably a little bit further out. I mean, one thing that we probably didn't mention is that obviously Salesforce.com will start building applications on this new platform also. And so as you actually see us building applications, you will see also more of those things pop up.
Here we have a question.
Hello. Do you have any Windows mobile support at all? Mobile 5 or mobile 6?
So we do actually have mobile clients, which is under the same VP at Salesforce.com. So yeah, I mean, we do actually have clients for BlackBerry, for Windows, and for iPhone. But it's different technology from the Adobe technology.
Would I need to install Flash Lite on that, or?
I think the mobility story around Flash and Air is actually, and I mean, this is kind of relatively newly announced from Adobe, is I think given that, for example, Apple wouldn't allow them to run Flash Player or Air on the iPhone itself, they actually came up with a pretty tricky solution, which is they take an Air application or a Flash application, then translate it or convert it into a native iPhone app. And so that's something that was actually presented at Adobe Max earlier this year, a couple of weeks ago. So I think that's actually what the story is in terms of running Flash on any mobile device. Right.
Mark, there's a question back there. Right there. To your left.
So it's actually not SQL Serverlite, but it's SQLite, slightly different. But so, I mean, the number one use case for offline edition is probably, let's say, field sales and service. So if, for example, you're a service rep or a sales rep for a company, and sometimes you cannot always guarantee that you're connected to the internet, yet you want to have access to your accounts and contacts and your opportunities, or maybe you visited a client and you want to capture what the conversation was about. So actually we do see quite a bit of need for that. Obviously we were, I think, before we started going down this path of actually upgrading our infrastructure, investing a lot into our offline client, we were thinking, well, probably in the year 2010, internet connectivity is everywhere, and you can use an Air card, but it proves to be a little bit more complicated than that. So I mean, it's basically just the easy means of accessing Salesforce data, whether you're connected to the cloud or not. But yeah, I mean, there's actually quite a few customers requesting this.
So it's still needed?
Yeah.
For security and for because I mean, some objects are just not available in the offline. You have to actually relate those objects to a master parent relationship in order to get something offline.
Oh, that limitation we actually eliminated about over a year ago. So you can actually take any custom object already offline with the current Force.com Connect offline. Ever since the Winter 10 release, Winter 09 release, which was last December. So that, you're right. I mean, it was a limitation in offline edition that you could only take custom objects offline that were related to one of our standard objects, but that actually we eliminated a long time ago.
I have a question right here in the middle.
Oh, there you are.
Can you talk to how this may work with the regular Flash and integrating existing SWFs or FLA files?
So I mean, if you have an existing Flash application, it is the basic same technology. I think, the way how you would actually have to change your data bindings would be a little bit different if you wanted to take advantage of our sync technology, right? Because if you, for example, wrote something on our Flex toolkit, the way how you access our API is slightly different than how we do it with Lifecycle. So, there will be a little bit of effort to make this work with our new components.
Do you have any examples or tutorials that would have something like that?
I think actually we don't, but that would actually be a very good idea. We should actually, I shall look into that. How to convert let's say, an application that you wrote on the Flex or Air toolkit into a Stratus application. That would be excellent, actually. Over there. Oh. I don't think that we introspect the metadata currently, so you would probably have to choose a different route. So if you use our label in field, I don't think that you can override it that simply. You could, of course, always use a standard Halo or Spark component and, implement your own functionality. Right. Any other questions?
Here's right there.
Oh, hang on. Unfortunately, I can't really hear you.
Hello? Okay, great. Is there a way, when you're working connected on the web, to still use that local copy of the data? What I'm thinking is getting some critical data cached for performance reasons, like a read-through cache. Would there be a way to do that transparently, or would you have to write that all by hand?
No, that's actually built into the platform. So, currently in the developer preview, whatever data we fetch in the desktop client application itself comes from the local data store, and we basically make sure that in the background we keep the data as current as we can. So even if you execute a query, it'll actually go against the local data store.
And that would be the case even if it is a piece of this Flash embedded in the web while you're logged on live, it would still use the local cache?
Well, if it is Flash, there are some different caching mechanisms. As Chris pointed out, that's a use case that we didn't really focus on for the developer preview. That's something that we will certainly revisit for the GA release, and how you could cache data in case you deploy to the web. Okay. I do know that Adobe actually provides some caching mechanism even if you run in Flash, but it's very limited. I think it's just a few hundred K that you can cache. And we would have to see if we want to take advantage of that or not. Over here. Right. So the question was whether you could actually fetch other data other than Salesforce data. Absolutely. So Lifecycle Data Services is a commercial product that Adobe sells. Adobe was very generous. In our use case, they actually give it to you for free. So if you use it in conjunction with Force.com, they don't charge you for it. You get an extra license for it to use it for free. But of course, you can actually, if you think back to this architectural diagram, you could actually plug in other data sources client-side also if you wanted to. Or you could actually run a Lifecycle Data server in your enterprise that connects somewhere on the server with other applications and then push it to the same client that we use for Force.com. So yeah, you can build various integration scenarios with this.
We're going to have to wrap things up. We've hit our hour limit. We have another session coming in after this. I think, Marcus, you'll probably be able to take some more questions.
Sure, yeah. I'll stick around if you have any more questions. Just come and find me.
Thank you all for coming, and hope you continue to have a great conference. Thank you.